What's going on, everyone? Welcome into Bayou Bengals football. So, LSU currently sits right now at 6-2 overall record, coming off a 62 to nothing win against Army. And I guess if we want to be pessimistic today, I guess we can make the case for why LSU is. I guess I'm going to be a little bit pessimistic and make the case for why LSU is not going to win a championship this year. So to me, I don't think they're going to win the conference title or get to the playoff, because I think, the issues, even though the issues on the defense, they've seemed to clean up a bit. Excuse me, I think they've cleaned up some issues, but I think the problem LSU has is if your defense is so poor at any point in the season, a lot of times those issues do not fully get fixed in that season. And what I mean by that is, if you remember Oklahoma in 2018, Oklahoma made it to the college football playoff. Kyler Murray, CeeDee Lamb, they had one of the more prolific offenses. But if you remember, their defense was so horrible that they just couldn't, they made some adjustments. But if a defense is just really really bad to bad at some point in the season, it's hard for that defense to make a full turnaround and become a championship caliber defense. So I think that is the case for why LSU is not going to do something special this year, because the defense we've seen to this point right now, I know they just came off a shutoff game, but it was against an Army, an opponent who is a good matchup for LSU because they primarily run the ball. They can't really expose the LSU secondary. So to me, the LSU defense, it's not, as we sit right now, it's still an average, probably an average to solid unit at best. So to me, I think it's just going to be really hard for them to, it's going to be really hard for them to really turn this thing around and become even a solid to good unit. So I think LSU, their national title hopes, I think, are pretty much done. But there obviously is a path for them to get to the SEC title, and obviously still a path for them to get to the playoff. But I think that ship has kind of sailed for LSU, just because you feel like for example, because I was being super optimistic when it came to LSU. I was really pushing the narrative that, look at the upcoming schedule. They have a chance to get some quality wins over Alabama, in Florida, and Texas A&M. But also at the same time, it's kind of one of those things where you kind of get the feel like they're going to stumble in one of those games, because an average defense, you just feel like is going to cost you down the stretch, especially in those November games. Bye week this week, which is good, but Alabama is just going to be a tough game for LSU. And it's one of those games where even if LSU wins, you kind of just, after that game, you're probably going to be breathing a sigh of relief, because it's probably going to be close. Alabama's going to throw a lot at you. If you do win, you have a lot of confidence, but also you can't really, not that you relax necessarily when you're going through the gauntlet of the SEC, but now, next week we got Florida, and then a couple more weeks, Texas A&M. I know they got Georgia State in there. That should be a free win, so to speak. But yeah, that's just really tough. Alabama, Florida back to back. That's just, that is when the SEC, November, that's when the SEC really becomes a grind. But yeah, I mean, it's cool to see LSU's defense improving. Looked like Zy Alexander was banged up in the game against Army. Hopefully he's healthy. And so I guess, I've hyped this guy up a bit. I think it's time. Mason Smith has just not really performed to the level we thought. He had, 1 or 2 sacks this season. I think usually, part of that's a guy who, forget you have a really good player and you put him in a defense that's bad overall, just their numbers just by default aren't going to be as good, because if other areas of the defense are just getting exposed so much, then it's hard for a dominant guy to really perform at a high level. But yeah, Mason Smith not performed at as high a level as people hoped, and Harold Perkins has had a pretty solid year, but by his standards and what he showed last year, you thought he was going to have a better year. But yeah, Mason Smith, Harold Perkins been a little bit of a disappointment this season. And yeah, I think the LSU defense really, just as a whole, been disappointing. I think the secondary was. I think the secondary was a question mark coming into this year, but they just haven't. There hasn't really been things. Things haven't really fallen. The dominoes haven't really fallen correctly for the LSU secondary, because you look at Ashton Stamps, like you thought he could be a guy that maybe as a true freshman just becomes the kind of like the Derek Stingley. Obviously, it's hard to duplicate a freshman year like he had, but you thought maybe Ashton Stamps could be that guy. Maybe Zy Alexander, even though he's been, Zy Alexander's had moments. I'll say this, he looks like he belongs out there. He's had moments, he's had flashes, but even he's had his fair share of getting beat and not competing at a high level. So I think it's with LSU, the secondary, it's a mix of just things haven't gone their way. Zy Alexander hasn't really become that guy. Ashton Stamps didn't really burst out of the scene. With Terrence Welsh, it's just been okay. Deuce Chestnut didn't work out. Major Burns just hasn't taken another step. Greg Brooks has been out. So yeah, just a lot. So some things, a lot. You could say some things working against them, some things out of their control. But yeah, the secondary just been a little bit of a mess. But I think what's crazy about LSU is, LSU's actually stayed pretty healthy. I don't think it's really been injuries and depth being exposed for LSU. They've stayed primarily, with a guy out here and there. But yeah, but to me, it's just things. And then Omar Spates just has, Omar Spates has been okay. I think just saying his play has been okay. I think that's just the perfect. If you had one word to describe his play, I think okay is just perfect, because he certainly has not been bad by any means, but Spates has really not been kind of the game changer at linebacker we thought. So yeah, between Harold Perkins not having the year, not living up to the standard and the potential he can play at, Omar Spates being a little bit of a disappointment in the secondary, just not not just performing at a high level, and guys just not playing super well. And then Chestnut, looks like he is, Chestnut out of the program. So a lot of things just didn't go their way in regards to the secondary, and the linebacking core was just, the linebacking core has just been, it's been okay, but just not good by any means. And then Whit Weeks has been okay too. So yeah, that's between the linebackers and the secondary. Just okay is the way to describe both those position groups. And then even the defensive line, Mekhi Wingo's been pretty good. Mason Smith has been solid. But yeah, the defensive line as a whole has just been probably been a little better than okay. I'd say it's been solid. But yeah, Mason Smith has not had his best year, certainly. And then Savion Jones has not really taken another step in his game. He's kind of been stayed about pretty similar to what he was last year. You could argue maybe he is a little bit better, but still, not really taken off and been like a standout defensively, and has not really been that key focal point to them getting victories. But you flip to the offensive side of the ball, though. LSU, it really has they really have had a lot of, how things haven't really worked out for them defensively. But when you look at offensively, Brian Thomas has been better than I thought. I thought Brian Thomas would just be solid this year. He's been outstanding, even been arguably elite. Malik Neighbors has been elite, maybe arguably the second best receiver in the country. If you want to argue statistic-wise, you could argue he is the best wide receiver in the country this year. And then Kyron Lacey, even though Lacey's really only had that one big game, Lacey's been pretty good. The running game has been pretty good. They were able to Logan Diggs was kind of able to establish himself as the go-to back. So LSU, with a combination of receivers, elite receivers, a running back, really taking control of the backfield and really shining, and then the offensive line performing at a high level. The offensive line performing at a borderline elite level. So when you mix all those things up, and then Jane Daniels looking like a Heisman contender. So when you add all those things up offensively, you really get an offense that is consistently putting up 30, 40, 50 points a game, and really a problem for opposing defenses. So yeah, LSU, certainly things have went their way offensively. A lot of things have kind of come into place that needed to for their offense to really shine and take off. But yeah, so I know it's early, so let's preview the Bama game. So, I think the LSU defense versus the Alabama offense is going to be interesting because, Alabama, Alabama offensively has kind of been like LSU defensively. A lot of things have not really come into place for Alabama offensively. Like Milroe has been good overall, but he's had a couple of really poor games. The running back room has been solid. The wide receivers overall have been solid, but no guy really has emerged. You thought that Burton could be that guy. They've got, they certainly have some talent there. But the Alabama offense has been solid. But I think, solid to good, but I think some people thought it could be even better. Jalen Milroe is talked about as one of the best deep ball throwers in college football. So yeah, Alabama been pretty good, but I think people expected a little bit more to this offense. And then yeah, Bama's defense though, certainly a strong secondary, one of the best corners in the country. So you look at that matchup, the LSU wide receivers versus the Alabama corners, that is going to be fascinating. Kool-Aid McKinstry versus Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas is going to be a terrific matchup. And yeah, but Bama, they defensively, this is an elite Bama defense, but it's a good, very good team. Pretty much primarily led by an experienced secondary. I mentioned Kool-Aid McKinstry, Malachi Moore, Terrion Arnold. Alabama certainly does have some dudes back there. So yeah, it's a experienced, strong group in the Alabama secondary. The main thing is in this game, can LSU run the ball effectively? I think that's gonna be huge in this game. How effective can they be at running the ball? Logan Diggs, this is his chance to really shine and flash in a big game. But yeah, Diggs certainly capable of doing big things, and yeah, he's gonna have a chance to really show people what he can do against a tough Alabama team. And yeah, LSU, how they stop the Alabama run will be key. Chase McClellan, he's a guy that can really get, when he gets going, he can do some damage. A guy that can break some long runs. But yeah, Bama run game versus the LSU defense. Jalen Milroe passing against the LSU defense. That will be, first of all, how Alabama should be able to have success throwing the ball against LSU, but if so, how successful can they be? I think is the question. But yeah, it's gonna be interesting game. And then Florida, Texas A&M. You get the feel, to me, you kind of feel like one of these games is gonna be close. One of the Florida, Texas A&M games is gonna be close. So yeah, Texas A&M will certainly present a challenging matchup. Florida will certainly present a challenging matchup. Florida's a team where I think they can match up with anyone. The talent they've recruited, Florida still has some dudes. Miguel Mitchell, Ricky Pearsall. Florida has guys that they can really line up and compete with almost anyone. But yeah, Brian Kelly. What's interesting about LSU this year? Brian Kelly, and even at Notre Dame, Brian Kelly would always take a lot of the heat for the failures of his team, which I find interesting because, and I wonder why it is, because if you notice, a lot of good coaches, the coordinator will get attacked for the team not performing at a high level. Like someone mentioned, why didn't Matt House get more criticism for the defense not performing at a high level? Why was it so much on Brian Kelly's shoulders? You look at LSU this year, they've had, when he was at Notre Dame, some years they would have just really poor performances, but you look at LSU this year, they really haven't had too many poor, they haven't really had a poor overall performance with the exception of, the second half of Florida State, but other than that second half of Florida State, LSU really performed at a high level in the rest of the quarters. But that's the thing with LSU, or with Brian Kelly, is how much of the losses he shouldn't have had in the past few seasons. How much of that, or how much of blame does he take for that? Obviously, he deserves quite a bit of it, being the head coach. But I just wanted to make that point that it's weird that Brian Kelly does not really get attacked too much when his team doesn't perform well. Because, I remember being a Michigan fan, especially a few years ago, everyone's, when something struggles, when the offense struggles, you immediately blame the offensive coordinator. When the defense is bad, you immediately blame the defensive coordinator. So, at some point, the blame does really have to fall on the head coach's shoulders, but it's just interesting with Brian Kelly how people always want to go for him right away. But I really wonder what Brian Kelly's state of mind is right now. I think that he understands they have an opportunity in front of them to really take control of the SEC. I think this is it's kind of like, I look at Michigan's schedule. They still have Ohio State and Penn State. So if you look at LSU's schedule, this is kind of the part of the schedule before the season starts where you kind of circle and you're like, I don't think a lot of people expected they'd have 2 losses here, but I think even if you could go back to the summer when it's all talk, all preseason hype, I think if someone told Brian Kelly, if someone told this LSU team, okay, you're going to get to this point with 2 losses, I think you'd be slightly disappointed, but also you'd be like, okay, let's put our head down. Let's bring our lunch pail. Let's see what we can do. Let's see what can we salvage. How can we make the most of this season? So I think LSU, I think at this point, they should kind of relish. obviously they would relish it regardless, but especially with 2 losses, I think they should relish the opportunity to get to the SEC championship game and be the first team to make the college football playoff with 2 losses, and maybe have the motto, why not us? So yeah, look for LSU to, I think they're really just going to put their head down, get after it. I think in some of these games they're just going to have some probably pull out more trick plays, just be a little bit more creative, just because with 2 losses and potential to and 1 loss away from pretty much being knocked out of SEC West contention, I think you're gonna just play a little looser, pull out some tricks, maybe show a few things you haven't shown all year, just to try to do anything you can to get some wins in tight games. But yeah, LSU Bama, it's gonna be an exciting game. This is a game people really look forward to. I think if you're not even a big time college football fan, if you follow the NFL draft really closely, this is a game probably you really want to tune into. This game always has a bunch of NFL caliber guys playing in it, and this year is not going to be any different. Mason Smith, Emory Jones not eligible till next year, but yeah, you look at guys like Mason Smith, Harold Perkins isn't eligible till next year, but yeah, you look at some guys that are eligible next year, could be big time top 10 players. But yeah, LSU this year, Malik Neighbors, Jaden Daniels, Omar Spates. You definitely have some guys that are draft eligible this year that are certainly going to be intriguing to watch, especially against and see how they play against a Bama team that also has a lot of draft eligible or NFL draft caliber guys. But yeah, this will be a fun matchup, LSU versus Alabama. But yeah, so yeah, Brian Kelly, that is really interesting that he takes so much of the heat for his coaching. I respect Brian Kelly. I think he's a guy who, I think with the way he kind of, maybe he's not like the biggest jerk, but can be kind of a jerk. I think that's kind of why he brings on a lot of the I think that's why some of the heat goes on to him. You remember that, like, for example, that reporter snapping back at him last year, that was kind of an example of the way, not people don't have respect for it, but the way that they like to really any chance the media does, they like to kind of to get on him, about him being late. He said if they said something, if you won, we would be on time. I think that's, Brian Kelly. Sometimes he has some smart remarks. I think this is kind of his personality. He's got kind of a different sense of humor. But I think he's got thick enough skin at this point because he's been coaching college football for a long time, going back 30 some years, all the way back in the 90s at Grand Valley. So this is a guy who, his first year, remember the athletic director at Grand Valley was saying, who the heck hired this guy? So yeah, Brian Kelly, he understands, how critical people are going to be. And, I think that's probably prevented him from having an outburst or really snapping back at people. Because if I were him, I would be annoyed. I'm sure he is annoyed. He just keeps it bottled up. I would be annoyed of, how much heat I get. The heat all coming at me when The coordinators obviously deserve, not that the head coach doesn't deserve most of the blame, but the coordinators do have their fingerprints on a little bit of the blame as well. So I'm going to wrap with that, guys. Thanks for tuning in to Bayou Bengals Football. Make sure to stay tuned for more episodes and clips. Until next time, peace.